Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Farming Opportunities in the Current Food System. Quick shout out to USDA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. This work has been funded and supported by a Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Grant from USDA NIFAS. So big shout out to them for supporting the work and supporting new and beginning farmers around the country. Tonight's webinar is our third and final webinar in a three-part fall series that's tailored to provide information to new and beginning farmers. And so the first two webinars that we had were Farming Realities webinar, but also a Growing Your Farm Business webinar, where we brought in young, new and beginning farmers just to talk about some of the things that they were experiencing, but also the work that they're doing on their farms. And so overall, what we seek to do with this webinar series is to provide realistic information to individuals that are interested in farming and agriculture and the food system. And so what we want you to know is whether you have access to 1/4 of an acre or have access to 100+ acres, there's a place for you in this food system in Louisiana. And so today's goal with our great panelists that we have with us today is to discuss opportunities for new and beginning farmers in the current agriculture and food system climate, but with a specific focus on what's happening here in Louisiana. And so we have some great panelists with us today, and we'll go ahead and jump into this. Our first panelist is Marguerite Green. Marguerite currently serves as the executive director of Sprout Nola down in New Orleans. And so the work that they're doing with Sprout Nola is they're working to build a better food system by making farming accessible to everyone. And so whether you're a hobby farmer or you want to make a career out of farming, the work that they're doing at Sprout Nola is there to support you. I know Marguerite best as a farmer organizer there in the city. And she's also a past candidate for Commissioner of Agriculture in the state. And so, Margie, I'm going to turn the floor over to you just to tell us a little bit more about yourself, the work that you're doing, but also the work that Sprout Nola does in New Orleans.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. I'm really glad to be here. Super glad to partner with LSU and Acadiana Food Alliance and everybody, is Crescent City Farmers Market, that's doing this. The FRDP here. And so, yeah, it's just been really cool to see this cohort come together, and also these one-off webinars, because we've seen this huge uptick in demand for, opportunities to learn how to farm. And so where Sprout Nola fits into that is that we're over here in the southeast corner of Louisiana, and we call ourselves a farmer and gardener technical assistance and training organization. It's a jargony way to say that we see everybody as having a role in the food system, and we want to support people and help them develop that role, whatever it is. So, we're saying as a farmer, you might have 1/4 of an acre, you might have 100+ acres, like Marcus said. You might also find yourself wanting to be just a cheerleader of local ag. You might find yourself being a gardener, a community gardener. And all of those things are valid ways to fit into a food system. They're all really necessary. We're talking about markets today, and we're talking about opportunities today. Maybe where you're going to find your shine is like on the farmers market side of things. But Sprout comes in and does technical assistance, meaning we help people fill out paperwork. We help people figure out which licenses they need to get. We help people figure out what their markets are. We help people find land and negotiate leases. We also do awesome programs like this with all of our amazing partners. And we do, literal farmer training, the brass tacks kind of stuff, how to plant a seed, how to use a seeder. And then we also coordinate community gardens and markets. So we have a weekly farmers market, which is called the Refresh Farmers Market. It's the lowest barrier to entry farmers market in New Orleans, which means that we are sort of a stepping stone towards partner markets with the Crescent City Farmers Market. So if someone's coming in and they have that 1/4 of an acre of land and they want to figure out, do I want to be a farmer? There's a huge investment that's needed to really throw yourself at that full time. We try to create stepping stones that really prepare people to run those businesses. And then the last thing that we do is we really throw ourselves behind farmer networking and organizing. So helping farmers advocate for policy change that might help them on a city level, on a state level, not as much on a state level right now, but then also on a federal level with some of the networks that we work with, just trying to make sure that the the rules and regulations that govern both growing food, but then also the sort of nutrition component of that, the farmers market and SNAP side of that, are really being informed by the people who are participating in them. Yeah, so I've spieled enough, and I will pass it back to Marcus because I don't know who's next.
Thank you, Margie, and thank you for being here with us today. Our next panelist is Bahia Nightingale, a friend of mine up in central Louisiana, and Bahia currently serves as the executive director for Farm and Food with CLETA, or the Central Louisiana Economic Development Alliance in Alexandria. And so the work that she's responsible for there is strengthening central Louisiana's rural economy with the development of resilient farm and ranch businesses. And so this is kind of the intersection of food, farming, and agriculture with local economic development, which is part of my primary interest in developing new and beginning farmers, is incorporating those things in economic development. And so Bahia, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Marcus, and thank you, Margie. So at CLETA, we serve the 10 parish regions of central Louisiana, and my role specifically within that is to keep our focus on food systems as an economic driver to create viable, livable wage, entrepreneurial opportunities, jobs, and businesses. So we see that investing in food systems helps central Louisiana continue growing into a uniquely creative, inclusive, and entrepreneurial space. And we focus our work in industry, entrepreneurship, community, leadership, and special projects. And our food system works falls within all of those categories. But what that looks like on a day-to-day basis is we teach beginning farmer rancher development programs. We have a farmer training program. We have a farmers market program development coordinator who helps incubate rural farmers markets. We manage a rural farmers market here in Alexandria that's weekly, 52 weeks out of the year. Barring hurricanes, of course. We do business coaching, and we've got a staff of coaches that specialize in everything from high-tech startups to farming to restaurants and retail, and everything in between. And so our work as a small nonprofit is focused on meeting community needs, and we center food systems work within that as a driving force of everything that we do. And so I'm excited to be here tonight and talk about the market opportunities and the different ways that all of the people that are on this panel are working together across the state in support of farming and ranching.
Thank you, Bahia, and huge shout out to you and the work that CLETA is doing there in central Louisiana. If you live in central Louisiana and you're interested in new farmer development or training programs, the farmer training program that Bahia and CLETA runs is just an excellent opportunity to hone in on your skill set and better develop yourself as a farmer. So thank you for being here with us today. Just to kind of switch it up a little bit here with the background and the approach to farming and food system. Our next panelist is Terreca Bates-Wells, who's with Capital City Produce here in Baton Rouge. And his Capital City Produce has grown into one of the largest produce distributors here in the Gulf Coast region. And so Terreca serves as a director of special projects with Capital City Produce. And so what her passion is being able to help develop and support entrepreneurs. And one of her responsibilities at Capital City Produce is she oversees their local farms initiatives. And so working with local farmers to make sure that Capital City Produce has a way to source local produce here in the state of Louisiana and in the surrounding areas. And so since I've known Terreca, I've known her to be a person that really works with farmers who are interested and farmers who have the scale to be able to supply Capital City Produce. And so once they identify those folks, she's been very good with working with those farmers to make sure they have access to the people and the resources necessary to assist them to getting them where they want to go as a business. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Terreca.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Again, good evening to everyone on the panel and to all of the participants on tonight. Very quickly, again, I'm just Terreca Bates-Wells with Capital City Produce. And here I am the director of special projects. And one of my main focuses or responsibilities is to increase the relationship with local farmers, with our end user, which are restaurants, hospitals, the hospitality industry, trying to get more local produce into their facilities. And over the years, that has been very difficult because we are a $100 million organization. And a lot of times, new, smaller beginning farmers, they start off with these farmers market model. And some, traditionally will transition into wholesale growers. So we figured out over the past 5 or 6 years of what our niche farmer looks like. So it's like a mid-scale to large-scale farming, minimum 5 to 10 acres, with the ability to provide consistent produce to our end users, because many of the folks that we service are the restaurant industry. So if they take a risk and put your product on the menu, then they need to make sure they can get it on a consistent basis. And so sometimes you find that's where the disconnect between local and industrialized farms come in, because those bigger farms, they're just able to consistently have the same product, versus on the local side, you have to deal with weather. We're dealing with hurricanes here, all kinds of things, right? So it's a difficult process, but it is very rewarding. We have right now in our network right at 20 local farms, and our smallest farm, I believe, they ship us maybe 5 or 10 cases a week. And then some of our larger farms, they ship 500 to 1,000 cases a week. So it just depends on, at the end of the day, the type of business that the farmer wants to go in. I know for sure, I will tell all you guys here, our niche farmer is probably not a farmer's market model, just because on the farmer's market model, these are very item-specific products. They come at a very premium price, which means it goes to the livable wage piece that Bahia talked about. But on the wholesale side, you have to realize when you go into a grocery store, it's just a simple concept that I like to share with people. On the wholesale side, when you go into a grocery store, you want local, but if I put a local product versus an industry created product, and you see a bunch of green onions for $5 because it's local, versus one that's $3 for $1, it's totally up to the consumer at that point which one they're going to purchase. And so you will find consumers that will be interested, in that type of product, but it becomes difficult. So you just have to kind of decide who is your customer and who do you want to service and how do you want to service them. And then it goes into the economic lifestyle that you want to achieve. So that's basically what we do here. We're trying our level best to get the smaller or mid-sized grower into the restaurants, hospitals, because it's really a distribution deal, right? If you're a small farmer, you want to farm, you don't want to deal with distribution. So our sweet spot is if we can get you up to scale where we can at least buy the product, we can get it into our facility, and now we've exposed you to over 3,000 customers. You just have to have the capacity to service some of them. Of course, not all of them, but that's basically what we do. So we're trying to support farmers to get them to a place so we can get their product through our supply chain out to the end user in the smoothest process possible. So that's what we do on a regular basis. And we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Thank you, Terreca. And what you said is important, because it's important for individuals that are interested in getting into farming, or those that are already in farming that are looking to scale up or looking to diversify their operations, to understand what the actual business of farming is from all ends of the spectrum. And so the perspective and the experiences that you bring to this conversation are very valuable. And what we're seeing is that, we have folks that are interested. They have 40 plus acres at their disposal, and even hundreds of acres, but just don't know what to do with it. And so the perspective that you can bring from the standpoint of Capital City Produce is very valuable to this conversation. And thank you for being here. Let's jump into this thing. Our first question, and we'll just kind of go around the horn here, starting with Margie. Very simply, what are the opportunities for new and beginning farmers in the current agriculture and food system climate that we have here in Louisiana?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question. It's also just so broad. So I'm excited to hear. I think one of the things that Terreca mentioned that I wanted to bring up is just that there are so many different ways to be a farmer, right? And there are just different consumers that you're trying to meet the demands of. You're deciding who your consumer is, what their price point is. And so what I think right now, the biggest opportunity is diversified vegetable operations that have the ability to scale up and grow in a sustainable way. So, it's going to be really, really difficult for someone to just come in and start a large enough operation if they don't have a family history of farming, if they don't have longer term training in farming or access to land that's a 10 plus acre operation and has those distribution relationships. What's going to be a lot easier is for someone to come in with maybe a farmer's market model or a CSA model that can then diversify to having wholesale relationships for that consistency as they learn their market. And so what it feels like it always comes back to for me is the biggest opportunity is in this food system for people who want to run farms like good, efficient businesses and grow things that have a good profit margin and are in high demand. That I think is the thing that is ripe for the taking right now. People who want to really run well-oiled operations. And that's what I'm excited to see. I see some of these names on the list and there are people that I see going to all of these classes that we have right now. And so I'm really excited for the people who are putting pen to paper, coming up with business models, really researching the crops that they want to grow so that they can start at a farmer's market in Alexandria and they can work with professionals like Bahia and her team or, us and our team down here. And maybe they're making $1,000 a week at a farmer's market and they have a vision to grow towards 500 cases with Cap City, as they go, but just really well thought out business models for diversified vegetable operations. We have a 12-month growing season. We have awesome soil. We don't hurt for water. The fact that the state of Louisiana doesn't corner the market on food production is nonsense.
Bahia, I'll throw that same question at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I absolutely love that Margie said all that because now I don't have to, but I will say that she's absolutely 100% right. In thinking about this question though, I thought of a few very specific things that I wanted to hit on. One is going to reemphasize what Margie said, but what I wrote down first and foremost as the entry level into this is professional year-round production for farmers markets and other direct to consumer access points. So that could be an online shop considering current climate. It should be an online shop in our current public health crisis. But that is a huge niche. I've got 3 meetings the rest of this week from communities that want to start farmers markets and don't have vendors. And what they don't want are vendors that come once every 4 months on the 3rd Tuesday with a full moon. They want people that are going to show up every week, 50 to 52 weeks out of the year, because that's what works when we're getting shoppers to shop. So the direct consumer market is desperate for professional year-round producers. And because this is agriculture and not fruits and vegetables, the other thing that's a huge opportunity right now is livestock kill and processing facilities. This is a very high cost investment startup, but you have to believe that this is a significant bottleneck in the food system in the state of Louisiana. And that's not unique in the nation. This is true all across the nation, that we need more state and USDA inspected kill and processing facilities, and Louisiana is primed for that. All of us know ranchers who struggle because they're selling their beef for bones because they're waiting on pasture to the point where they can't cut them into steaks legally anymore. So we have a huge opportunity there, and that's again a very real opportunity, but a very high cost opportunity. And I recognize that that's not for everybody. But mobile units with university support would be a great opportunity here, and that's one that we're all aware of and would love to find the right entrepreneurial group or perhaps cooperative to address that market need. That's a very high profit area in the food system as well. And then the third and final one as a specific example is mid-market agriculture, which is where Terreca comes in, which is source identified, storied product for wholesale. So scaling beyond direct to consumer into wholesale and bulk production, but maintaining the ethos and ethics of the direct-to-consumer market. So it's food with a story and a face behind it. It tends to uphold the same values that the typical direct-to-consumer customer is demanding. They want to know who grew it, how it was grown, was it humane, were the farm workers treated well, did the animals die painlessly? All of those characteristics in the value system of the food are identified in a mid-market agriculture market, which is where Capital City Produce is one of our best partners in the state for mid-market ag. But that demand is present with all of the produce wholesale buyers in our state, whether it's grocery store, restaurant markets, national distribution. And Margie hit it on the head. We have the climate, we have the water, and we have land. But again, we see success in mid-market ag for people who have successful business experience in another industry that they want to apply to agriculture to run it as a business, or people who have multiple generations of access to large-scale production of fruits, vegetables, and animal proteins. So I think that right now in the state, and especially in our region, those three things are the biggest, wide open, unmet niche areas for the food system.
Thank you, Bahia. And Terreca, I'll throw that at you, the same question at you, but from a larger perspective, what are the opportunities for new and beginning farmers?
You know, that's always a tough one for me. That's always hard because what I found is I 100% agree with what the lady said before. The best way to get into the industry, I think Margie kind of hit it on the head probably earlier when she talked about those low barriers of entry into a farmer's market. But what I found is those farmers typically never transition into a mid-sized commercial grower for multiple reasons, right? So you almost have to decide as a farmer early on, who is your customer? So you need to build your business plan from that perspective to say, I want to be a wholesale or a commercial grower. Your model is going to be totally different. So that I would say, just the opportunity is there for a farmer's market, CSA box type style. That's out there because there's a niche consumer base that likes that type of product. They want to know the farmer. They're willing to pay premium price. But as you grow to that mid-size, mid-scale, one thing you have to realize, if you're a mid-size farmer, you're probably at the cusp of being able to sell to Capital City, but not probably full time, because you're going to have to do some price negotiations so you can get it into our consumer base, versus if you have the capacity to deliver yourself, if you have the capacity to build your own customer base, and Cap City would come on the back end to say, if you have surplus, we can purchase those items once you get to a point where you can't get rid of the product on your own. That's what I consider mid-size. But once you get to commercial level, you basically base all your pricing off of the market. You have the ability to deliver, or you're in some type of location to where we can get the product from you and deliver it still at a fair price to the farm. So those are like the three things. You have to decide if you're a farmer's market type CSA box farm, or if you're mid-scale, willing to put in the work to create your own customer base. And then if you have surplus, you begin to transition to commercial wholesale, or you come in and just decide, like Bahia said, if you have that history of farmers in your family, and you have access to land, and you have the equipment, because it's a huge investment. It's a huge investment that takes a while for you to see profitability. So those are the opportunities there. You just have to decide which avenue you want to go down.
Thank you for all that great information. And I think one of the key things that Terreca said there is the importance of writing a business plan and mapping out what your farm business is going to be, so you can have a roadmap to get you to whatever point that you want to get to as a farmer. One of the greatest examples that I've seen is I met a farmer in North Carolina last year. He's a construction worker, but had a plan to go into farming, and so he started out farming on about a half an acre and selling direct at farmers market, and got up to about 5 acres and realized that he had tapped out on his market potential at farmers markets and wanted to expand larger. So he eventually scaled up to about 80 acres and is now no longer selling at farmers markets and now only selling directly to grocery stores. And he had, the vision and the model to a point where this same guy who grew up, born and raised in North Carolina, bought 20 acres of land in the Dominican Republic and is now going to grow avocados in the Dominican Republic and import those back into the United States and sell them under his farm brand. And so I say that to say that, even whether or not you start small, if you have a plan and a vision and map out your path to success, it can be done. And so, the sky's the limit, and the market opportunities are available for anyone who wants to engage in agriculture and farming. Which leads us to our next question. And Margie, I'll go back to you on the first one, first with this. If a farmer is looking to start or expand or diversify their operations, what advice can you give them in making their choices on what to grow?
Yeah, so I am going to say this is my hot take. I'm going to say the exact opposite of a piece of advice that I hear as the answer to this question sometimes. I have many times heard people say, grow what you like to eat. And I don't, sorry, can you hear me? Am I hearable? Okay, great. I've heard people say, grow what you like to eat. I'm going to come in and say, don't grow what you like to eat. I mean, you might end up growing what you like to eat, but that's not really that great of a place to make a business decision from. And so what I think the best and most informed way to make a choice like this is to kind of work through something that Bahia was just talking about with those processing facilities. You want to figure out what's missing, like what is possible in our environment that is in demand. So you can find that out from talking to ag professionals. You can find that out from talking to people like Terreca. You can find that out from talking to market managers. You're going to want to come in a way that is very serious, right? You don't want just a one-off like, hey, what's missing from this market? Because people ask that a lot and they don't go anywhere with it. So you want to say like, I am looking on this timeline to start an operation. I'm trying to do the work of making this happen. What is missing from this market? But then you want to take that a little bit further, which is what is the profit margin of the thing you find out is missing? And is there a market for that thing, right? Or is it anecdotally people are just asking about it? And if there's not a market for that thing, can you be the person that develops that market? So another thing I hear a lot is that people will be like, you can make so much money on goji berries, or you can make so much money on, I see Bahia laughing, like I hear this one a lot. Or you can make a lot of money on saffron, and you can make money on those things, then they do grow here, but you're going to have to develop a whole new market. And that is a more than full-time job. Like that is the job of an industry with a lobby and staff. So what you're looking for is that sweet spot of what is missing or underrepresented, what sells and what makes money when you sell it. I feel like people love to buy carrots at market. There are never enough carrots at market when carrots come to market, but you can't run a business just selling carrots. So there's just a line of questioning that you need to have to make that decision. One of the things I think about a lot is artichokes. Down here in South Louisiana, artichokes grow really well. And if you hit the timing right, and when they come to market, they're snatched up and they have a high price point, and they're gonna have a high price point in the grocery store. They're gonna have a high price point at market. I am not saying that someone should be an artichoke farmer, but I think if you asked a question during artichoke season, how is this going for you? For the vendors who have put a 50-foot row down, they're going to say, we could use more artichokes at market. So yeah, it just requires asking the wisdom of the people who are doing the work and then taking the questioning a couple steps further. The other thing I'll say, and I think probably everyone on this call has felt this burn a couple times, and maybe there's an answer that I just don't know yet, because frequently there's an answer I just don't know yet. There is not a comprehensive local food marketing study. Okay, thank you. You guys are shaking your head. I'm like, is there a tool we haven't shared? And there should be. We have no way to tell someone what is missing in this market. I wish I could just slide a piece of paper across my desk to a new grower, but I can't. It takes a lot of legwork to figure out what you want to add to your business or what you want to start growing. So I'll throw it to everybody else now.
Bahia?
Yeah, so I think that this is my least favorite question, and it's almost always in the top 3 questions when I work with a new and beginning farmer or rancher. Tell me what to grow. And Margie really gave some very great, very clear examples of how to approach it. And we do something really similar in our program. I use a Venn diagram in our class because in college, a professor told me that if you want to look smart, the first thing you do is you draw a Venn diagram on the whiteboard. So we put up a Venn diagram of 3 intersecting circles, and the sweet spot is where we want you to start thinking about developing your crop plan. The first circle is what do you love to grow, because it's usually easier to grow a product that you have some sort of an affinity for. And so that's slightly different than what Margie was saying. Don't just grow what you love to eat. If you're a farmer, you're going to learn how to love to eat everything that you grow. So just be prepared. But what do you love to grow? As a farmer, my favorite crop to grow is hardneck garlic. I would grow 100 acres of hardneck garlic if I could every year. That would be my sweet spot. That would be my one big cash crop. So that's one circle. The other circle is what will customers buy? And that's market research and needing to know what your community identifies with on their plate is the market research. And so who is your customer dictates that. You may have a lot of different customer pools if you're a diversified small farm. You may do a farmer's market, you may do a CSA delivery, you may have a couple of restaurants, or perhaps you're at scale and you're wholesaling. So that is going to dictate a whole bunch of crops on that list. And then the third one is climate. What can you grow on the land that you have? What water do you have available? What's your soil type? What's your labor availability? What's your infrastructure like? What's your washing and packing, your harvesting and your storage? All of that. What can you grow? What's your infrastructure? Where those 3 circles intersect. So I make my students write very comprehensive, very long lists for all 3 of those areas, and then identify the things that are on all 3 lists. And that's where we start to do a crop plan. But then we also encourage our farmers to experiment with 5 to 15% of new products developed every season. So that creates a pressure to constantly be doing market research, constantly be understanding what your infrastructure has the capacity for, and always expanding your horizons of what you might like to be growing and producing on your farm. And so that's a very hard, very complex answer to a very, very simple question, which is never what our beginning farmers and ranchers or any of our entry-level or pre-emerging entrepreneurs want to hear. It's the same thing if someone comes in and they say they want to start a farm-to-table restaurant. What do I put on my menu? And it's like, oh, right. You want a 5-minute answer and I've got a 5-month program. So we really work one-on-one and do a lot of in-depth technical assistance to help everybody find the answer to that question that they need, because there isn't a cookie cutter. And the reason we don't have a resource like the one Margie was saying, wouldn't it be great if we just had that piece of paper to slide across the desk, is because the answer to all of those questions can vary so dramatically, even in a community that's 5 miles from the next neighboring community. Those things are all going to be very, very, very different. And so we don't end up with a lot of cookie cutter resources. until you get into wholesale, until you get into scaled up production of a more limited selection of crops, which is where Terreca and Capital City have the list of things that they can slide across the table and tell you what to grow, which is why I love working with Capital City. So I'm going to turn it over to Terreca to take it from there.
That was an excellent slide over, ma'am. So she's absolutely right. So when people ask me, what do you want me to grow? It's so easy for me to pull up the list and tell you, okay? So this is how it works. It's really not complicated at all. You have to understand commodity items versus niche items. I'll say that all night. Now, local, if we can grow it, back to Margie's point, we have the conditions to grow these items. If it's, what was the item you gave the example of? The
Artichokes.
The artichokes. Okay. So if you call us and you say, okay, do you sell artichokes? I can easily look into my system and tell you we sell 100 cases a week of 18 count artichokes. The struggle now for the farmer is, can you produce an 18 count case that's consistent on a weekly basis for that artichoke season? And there's only going to be so much elasticity when it comes to price, right? So you have to take that into consideration, because you're competing against these industrialized farmers out in California, Mexico, whatever the case may be, and they're selling this stuff for market price. So that's where the challenge comes. But I always tell folks, if you want to grow something, it's easy to call Capital City and we could tell you, these are typical staple items that you will find in any restaurant, any grocery store. All right, and that's based on volume. But that's not where your money per se is going to come from, where you're going to become a millionaire, right? It's just, you have to have a lot of volume to get to that point. But then the niche items is, we have consumers that'll call us, and just to give you an example, in Alabama, they have this thing that they call Silver Queen corn. It's only grown in Alabama. It only grows for about 6 weeks. But if you can grow this product and you have the land there, I mean, it's one of those things that it's like yellow gold. I mean, everybody wants it, you know, in a 3 or 4 state area. So there are niche items that you can grow hundreds of acres and people want it, right? Mirliton, that's one of those things that we grow well here in the South. There are very few people that's growing Mirliton, but it's a difficult product to grow, right? It doesn't last that long. So another one is okra. Okra doesn't travel well. So as much as people want okra in Louisiana, after 2 days, it starts to turn color. So it's just all these things. So there is a market out there. It's just, you have to understand, anything that a consumer purchases in a grocery store, you just go in the store, and if you see green onions, just think of, that's a common product, and you slap a local sign on it, people will buy it, right? It is what it is. It's not complicated. If you see bell peppers, switch it over to local. It's the same thing. I mean, you can just go in and just think of what are traditional items that people purchase in high volume. Just figure out if you can grow it in the South, and if you can compete from a pricing perspective, right? Make sure the market isn't saturated already. But that's a very easy thing to do. The other thing is, the product that you decide to grow, you have to make sure that it can be easily substituted if you run out on the local level. You have to even think at that level. If I grow this corn and I get 20 customers to commit to me, will I have a backup plan if the hurricane happens? Because now you put all these businesses in a bind that have signed these contracts with you. So that's another piece you have to think about. And the third thing you have to think about is, when you come to Capital City today, I still may not be able to buy your product for a year, for a couple of reasons. You grow the product, I need to see that you can be consistent with the product, that your specs fit into my warehouse of what our consumers are accustomed to swap out the product. And then I have to be able to notify our customers that we're bringing in a new product, because sometimes we have vendors that we've had for 10 years and they've been consistent for the 10 years. So we have to go out and convince these customers, which you do a lot of marketing on behalf of the farmer, to say, hey, we need to transition over. We have a new local product. They want to know specs. They want to know consistency. They want to know, is the boxing the same? I want to know how close is the pricing. So we have to do all those things to garner up the interest. And sometimes that takes us up to a year, and we absorb all of that cost because we're committed to getting the product in. But that's another thing. So it takes a while just to change the consumer behavior. And if it's a niche product, again, just if we want to put it on a true menu, sometimes menus only change twice a year. So you have to take that into consideration. So you grow it in the spring, they don't change the menu to the fall, you won't have the product again to the next spring. You're a year out from being able to sell your product. So you have to, during that time of getting into our warehouse, you still have to have your own consumer base to be able to sell your product. So that's why I said, if you're mid-size, you have to have a system in place already, and then Capital City kind of tags on behind you. And I'll say this, and I'll turn back over to you, Marcus. We find a lot of new startup farmers, they call us and say, what can I grow for you? And the answer is absolutely nothing. You can't grow anything for me because I need to see something. So you need to grow whatever you want to grow and then bring it to me so we can sample it, get the specs, or whatever the case may be. But I honestly just can't walk up and tell you, grow okra for me. I can't. You have to grow these 10 things and you figure out if you do it well. And if you do that for a couple of years, then we can start the relationship to say, hey, we can partner. But I just like to be very honest with the farmers up front. So you just don't have unrealistic expectations, because a lot of farmers say, I want to be a farmer. And they call us and say, we'll guarantee you will buy it, but you haven't put anything in the ground. It's like, it's very difficult to do that. We have to be able to see your consistency with growing for an extended period of time before we can bring that product into the warehouse.
Farming and agriculture is definitely a business. And so when we're talking about that notion, we've always talked about scaling up. And so like if you start at a half an acre and begin to work into that process, you know, whether you're starting out consumer direct, moving into more wholesale market channels, you know, that process allows you to do just what Terreca outlined there. It allows you to get your feet under you, get your business in together and to go through that process. And I'll give a quick example. When we're talking about what to grow, we were visiting a small farm in the Opelousas area, and we had a produce buyer from Rouse's with us. And so we had gone, this guy was growing sweet potatoes, and we thought that he was growing one variety of sweet potato. So when we get to the farm, it turns out that this guy has about 5 or 6 different varieties of sweet potato on the farm. And the buyer from Rouse's, his eyes just lit up, because all he could see was going into his grocery, in the produce section of his grocery store, with all of these displays with these different varieties of sweet potato and the sign local going in his stores. And so he didn't know that those products were grown here. Those varieties of sweet potato were grown here in the state. And so, you know, there's no right or wrong answer to, you know, what can you grow? It takes a lot of market research to do that, and talking with people and understanding the business model of a capital city, and even talking to local farmers market managers to understand what's the market need. And then you as the farmer have to make the determination about what is in my wheelhouse, what's in my ability, what do my resources allow me to grow. And so that process takes time. It's impossible to become a successful farmer overnight. And that's just a learning process that folks have to go through. And so and before we get into our last main question here, if participants and folks online, you know, have a specific question that they would like to direct at the panelists, or just an open question, feel free to use the Q&A box to put your question in. And so when we get through our last question, we'll probably have some time and hopefully be able to get some to your more specific questions for people online. And so please feel free to use the question and answer feature on Zoom. But our last question here, and each of our panelists come from different places in the food system and agriculture in the state. And so if an individual is new or a beginning farmer, and somebody that's been, you know, in the game for about 5 years, what is the most specific, informative advice you can give that individual, that farmer, about being successful in agriculture and the food system? And Margie, we'll kick it off with you.
Yeah, so I'm going to come at this question from the angle of who I talk to most frequently, right? like what kind of farmer, where someone is in their career. And also with the lens of like, my work is work to, like I said, develop people all along that spectrum of gardener to farmer, and really be cool with wherever anyone wants to be, and try to assist them and remove barriers wherever they want to be. And my piece of advice, and I've given this many times, is like, run it as a business or don't run it as a business, but you need to choose. And that is not like run it as a business or buy. That's like, I am here for whatever you want to do. And I am going to, as a professional, I'm going to try to make whatever you want to do, like sing, and I'm going to try to help you do whatever you want to do. But I have lost years of my life, and I have seen people lose years of their life to living in the middle and believing that they could get the amount of money that they needed to survive, maybe to raise a family, to pay their light bill, whatever it is, farming sort of like somewhere in the middle. And I'm really invested in seeing people either make a plan and take the leap and like commit to running a farm, because we need that in this state right now. We need more farmers. We need more farmers throughout the whole country. But I don't want to see a bunch of people get burned out chasing a dream that could have been like a beautiful way to engage with their community, could have been an awesome way for them to like use empty space at a church, could have been like all of these really awesome things that are important to a community in terms of a volunteer project, in terms of a food bank project, in terms of a nonprofit job, in terms of just like something they love to do with their neighbors. Let that be enough if that's what you want to do. But if you want to run a business, I want you to run a business. And I say that as a person who thinks absolutely all of those options are super valid. But making that choice, I think Terreca said it, like building what you're doing for the customer that you want. Even if you can't meet that customer day one, there's some like missed time in this idea that if you want to sell to Capital City and you want to sell okra, we're hearing you need to be able to show that you can grow that product. You can sell that product for like 2 years before that's going to be your market. So, then you're going to have a reasonable plan for what is the farmer's market I'm going to go to? What am I going to sell at that farmer's market? And how am I going to finally get into Tarika's office with my beautiful okra someday? But yeah, I think that I'm a little woo-woo on this. Like, I think we have the one thing we have in our life is our time. It is the one thing that we are promised. And I just want you to do the right thing with it. And I want you to be happy and safe and healthy and well. And running up a hill, pushing a boulder isn't that. So if this is your dream, really do it.
Bahia?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was thinking about this question, especially, the word in the question that stuck out to me was successful. So as a business coach and also as a farmer, and as someone who works almost exclusively with farmers and ranchers and in food systems policy, that's an important question, is how do you define success? Do you define success as forming a cooperative that operates outside of capitalism, that is meeting nutritional needs in your family and maybe a few families near you? Or maybe you have a goal of feeding a lot of families near you, but outside of the exchange of money and all of the things that go along with capitalism. That's great. If that's how you're defining success, I'm going to work with you to figure out how to meet that success goal. But just like Margie just said, if your goal is to grow and sell food to people, then as your business coach, I'm going to sit with you and make you get your act together. I'm going to hold you accountable to that driving factor of success. So you could define success under business terms, community development terms, lifestyle terms, financial terms. There's so many different ways to describe success. And so my job, what they pay me to do, is to make sure you're successful, which means you get to decide what that is, and my role is to help you get there. And what's important to me is that we're growing food that's safe and nutritious and in demand in our state, in our community, on my street, on your street. Everybody eats, and we can do a whole lot better as a state. We are a tiny little state. We know everybody here, right? The 6 degrees of separation in Louisiana, it's like 1.5. So, you know, and I'm not even from here. I've lived here 4 years and I feel like I'm already down to 2 degrees of separation. So like, we can do this. There's this huge demand, and we have resources. The universities have risen to this food systems work so well in Louisiana, Southern and LSU both, extension agents, nonprofit agencies, and businesses like Capital City are all putting resources here because we recognize this need. So I think the most specific and formative advice is to make sure you know what your definition of success is. Because if you don't understand what that is, then we won't either, and so we can't help. And that's, again, there's no easy answers. This isn't cookie cutter work. Food systems work is slow and messy because it's driven by so many different factors. This isn't building a better mousetrap. This is food and agriculture. So it's climate, it's environment, it's weather, it's people, it's markets, it's access, it's transportation. There's so many aspects to this that make it very complex. But we have an amazing team in this state that's dedicated to making your vision of success work. So we're here for it.
Terreca, from your perspective.
I think I have two answers. I must address it from a capitalistic perspective. And I know some people may cringe when I say that, because that's not, some people like to operate outside of that environment. And I respect that. I 100% do. So that's why I want to answer it in two different ways. So because we are in a capitalistic society, and that's the majority right now, we have to think about it as an option. And if we do go about it as an option, then your business, 100%, just like the lady said, it has to be run as a well-oiled machine, and it has to be a functioning business. If you define success and it's connected to profitability, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you do decide that you want to upturn capitalism or change or have a model of community, that is also very commendable and a very respectable way to build your business and your farm. When you go about it that way, though, you have to take on the mindset that you become a master marketer, because now you're not coming to Capital City per se on the wholesale side. You're building a community. You're changing behaviors of the consumer, and you're asking them to take on a huge responsibility that will fundamentally create an upheaval in their own lives. And what I mean by that is capitalism creates convenience, right? So you go to the grocery store, you purchase these items, you go home and you don't think about it at all anymore. It's just a part of your lifestyle. So that's what people have been doing for the past 50, 60 years since grocery stores have come into existence, right? People are no longer growing their own food. So if you want to be successful outside of that, you're going to have to create a community that's willing to wait until Saturday to get what they could get on their way home on Tuesday, right? So you're building a whole different network. You will not have all of the items that they need. So they have to get that mindset. We're a community and we're building a smaller food system that they're going to say, I'm going to buy these 5 things from a smaller farmer and then go to the store to get the rest of the items. So you're fundamentally changing the mindset of your customer. So you're going to be living in 2 different worlds. So you have to decide, are you willing to put in that type of work? Are you willing to put in that type of work to get to that type of local food system that we all ideally want, right? We all ideally want that. That's the end goal. But how many consumers are willing to buy into that ideology along with those farmers that want to do that? Okay, so you can have this dream, you can have this vision, and I support it, but you have to get that mindset of, now I have to become a master marketing expert to draw these people away from what they have been accustomed to for the past 50 or 60 years. Okay, so that's just one of those things. Those are my two pieces of advice. You have to understand, if you're in capitalism and you want to determine your success by profitability, that's one. And if you're thinking of creating a smaller food system that works, then you are also going to have to figure out how to build your consumer base that supports your ideologies fundamentally at the same time. So that's my advice. You just have to pick which road you're going to go down.
All of those answers were awesome, and thank you for that. One question that I'm going to throw out, and I'm probably going to throw this at both Margie and Bahia based on what you've seen. So for new and beginning farmers, one of the questions that is always asking, we have a similar question in the chat box: are there grants available? Is there free land available? What can I get basically what can I get for free to start my farm business? When you get questions like that, how do you respond to folks? Or what is your response to folks to help them in their endeavor? And I'll throw it either to Margie or Bahia.
Okay, I'm sure we have, actually, it's regional, so maybe we have different answers. There are absolutely going to be things, tools of the trade, networks, all sorts of like little tips and tricks and grants. But at the end of the day, like, it might seem like a huge thing. You can, like a $5,000 SARE grant, which stands for Sustainable Agriculture Research and Extension Education, sorry. That might sound like a ton of money, because it is a ton of money. I mean, like let's be clear, $5,000 is a ton of money, but in the scheme of things, those hacks, so to speak, are not going to be as big or as impactful if you are running a farm business as they might seem to be. So I'll say that with grants, because no one is going to grant you, give you grant money just to run a farm, right? That basically doesn't exist. You might get $200, here or there from a company that's like looking to support a farm for some reason, but that is not going to be sustaining. And then in terms of land, land is just this like central point, this like, it's like the tangled earbuds of this whole situation, which is that land is really difficult to access, especially for low capital farmers. And when I say low capital farmers, I mean anybody who wasn't born into having capital or land. And then that specifically means Black farmers, female farmers, LGBTQIA farmers, brown farmers. Like, obviously this is not distributed equitably across our country. And you will be able to find ways that cities will often give you intermediate use of property because they think they are tricking you into maintaining their property, which would cost them a lot of money to mow, as an intermediate use until they develop that land. And the thing is, when you are investing in farmland, your blood, sweat, tears, and organic matter, it requires that you have tenure on that land. You have to be able to have tenure on land, and it is very difficult to find free land that you will be allowed to stay on. It'll take 5 years to build any sort of usable soil on a city lot if you don't have a bunch of money to truck in compost. And if you have that kind of money, then you should buy property. And so, I think just remembering that a lot of organizations that will market that they have free land, they think they're getting one over on you. And if you think you're getting one over on them, you might be wrong.
Bahia, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. So much. So, this is America. And if you want to start a business, No one's going to give you money to do that. That doesn't happen in any industry. But it's not unique to farmers that people say, I've got a great business idea. I would like the government or my community or someone to give me money so I can actualize my business idea. I hear that all day, every day. And the answer is, no, you don't. If you can't start your business without a grant, then it's not a viable business, and you haven't done a business plan that's appropriate. That being said, there are plenty of ways to be involved in food systems work, like we've discussed, that aren't in that type of process. So if you have a system in mind that is not a for-profit business, perhaps it's a nonprofit or some other type of structure, there are organizations that may give you grants. But as someone who manages a lot of grant budgets, let me tell you, it's going to cost you more to manage and administer those funds than it would to raise those funds in another way. So, and nobody ever believes me when I tell them that, but once you get 4 or 5 grants, and I don't care if they're for $100 a piece or $100 million a piece, you're going to be spending more than 50% of your time administering and managing those funds for the people who gave them to you. They have requirements of you. And once you're doing that, you're not farming anymore. And so you're done. So it's not helpful. Our role, all of these people in this state, we are here as technical assistance providers to help you figure out a plan so that you can do this and you don't need a grant from anybody to do it. You may need a loan because loans are a real part of doing business, and we can help you with that as well. Land access is an issue I've worked on across the nation, and there are so many creative ways to access land outside of buying or leasing it. They all require, just like grant management, they require the building of relationships. There's a huge amount of time investment, whereas if you can afford to just write a check and pay rent or lease or buy land, you don't have to do that. But there are very creative ways based on relationships within your community and region that we can show you that have worked in other places and in other communities. There's no system for making this work, but there are a lot of us across this state that have relationships that we want to leverage for you so that we can find creative ways to get you access to the land that you need for your business or your community project. Whatever it is, we want to help you do that. It just takes a ton of time and a ton of relationship building. That's the trade-off, but it's definitely doable. It just may not be what you think it should look like. It's always going to look a little different.
Terreca, have you seen anything in that regard with some of the folks that you work with? Have you come across those questions? And if you have, what advice could you give folks?
Really, this one is probably a little bit different, just not really in my wheelhouse. I don't really have a lot to add on this one. I just kind of support basically what Mark and Bahia said. That's not really one of those issues that we come across. That's not typically when we're approached with land, we're never really approached at that level because it's such an early stage. It's more so for us, we deal with once they get the product. I will share this. Once we get the product, I've had farmers come to me and say, I want to be the first entry on the early part of the season so that I can get premium pricing on the product. Right. So not that they're looking for land or anything like that. They're beyond that when they get to us. They're saying, okay, just for an example, when do strawberries come online? Local Louisiana strawberries, when they come online. And if they come online, typically February 15th, you have farmers saying, well, will you give me above market price if I can sell it January 1st? Right. So they're trying to figure out what's the variety where they can get this case of product into our facility and sell it for $40 because in April it's going to go down to $9. Right. So they're trying to get maximum on the top side. So that's what we deal with more from a pricing perspective, but not land at that level of trying to get deals from that perspective, but just trying to maximize when they do get the product in the ground.
Perfect. Thank you. And the thing that I can add to that is that, for new and beginning farmers, if you're a new farmer and you're looking to get into farming, The first thing that you probably should consider is putting together that business plan. You know, organizations like USDA and some banks have low interest rate loans that are available, and you can probably even do small business loans that are available to you to help you get that business started. But nobody is going to invest that type of money in you without you being able to prove that you're serious about what you're going to do. And not only, you know, doing a business plan, and if you're a new farmer, you're interested in getting in farming, also participating in some kind of training program to show that you're going out and acquiring the knowledge and the skills necessary to make that farm viable. And so that's why, you know, farmer training programs like what Bahia has in Central Louisiana, the program like the past 3 cohorts that we've had here at the LSU AgCenter, and there's another program in New Orleans with the Recirculating Farms Coalition. And being able to participate in these programs and going out and get some additional training knowledge so that those lenders know if they're making you that loan to get your business started, that you have something, some type of skill that's been acquired to help you be successful. But here, you had something else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to hit a couple of points that I forgot to mention. One is we do run a micro business lending program specifically to address this need. And it's something I wish we could offer in the whole state. It's something I work on to try and figure out how to bring this statewide. But right now, it's only available to people who are living and farming in our region and have a business coaching relationship with us at our organization. But we do have a business lending program. The other thing is yes, farmland is expensive, but I really want to put it in perspective. Nationally, the cost of farmland per acre is just under $4,500 per acre. But in Louisiana, it's $2,900. And that's really flawed data because the type of ag land that they're talking about is USDA census ag land that's in commodity production. But the cost of that ag land is what actually drives it impacts our home prices and our mortgage rates. It impacts our rent. And so it impacts small scale access to land in a very, very big way. But I've lived and worked in, this is my 14th state to do food systems work in, and I work with organizations all across the nation. And there are places like Nebraska and Iowa, where last year we saw ag land going at one point for almost $8,000 an acre. And so that is incredibly high. And here in Louisiana, we're some of the lowest in the nation right now. That's going to change. That's really going to change. Foreign countries and investors and companies are the largest buyers of agricultural production land in the United States right now. More land is owned by foreign countries and companies in ag production than it's owned by American family farms. And so that's going to keep driving that acreage price up. Now is a really good time to figure out creative, cooperative endeavors to buy land. End of rant. Sorry.
We're coming up on our end time here. So I just wanted to give the opportunity to go around the horn and for each panelist to be able to give any final remarks that you may have to folks related and advice that you may have for new and beginning farmers. And Margie is as always, we'll kick off with you.
Well, here I am again. I want to drill home on something Bahia just said, like one specific word, and I want it to sort of like, it is my central point in all this, like cooperative ways to buy land, collect it. Like she also talked about, you know, having a cooperative around that slaughter equipment. It's not a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. But the thing is, like with the way that food production, land prices, the market has moved in our country, it is incredibly difficult to make a living alone, growing food or, you know, pasturing poultry or having a ranch or doing cut flowers. This is so much work. And I think we often talk about doing things collectively or collaboratively or communally in terms of running a farm business. And everyone seems to be like, yeah, that's a great way to do it. But then no one does it. I know this many people who are actively running like a really, really, really well-oiled cooperative model business where they are actually doing their board meetings and doing their payouts in a cooperative style, like really like listening to their bylaws, being democratic, all that good stuff that's in place because it works when it is done correctly. And so I would really like people to feel less alone in this and to feel like if they were going to open, any sort of large lifelong business that they wanted to outlast them, they would want to do that with partners. And so I just really, really, really want to compel people actually do this with partners. Don't just brush that piece of advice aside. Like the people who do it together and have a safety net together and can buy in on this together, that makes land more accessible to buy. I'm very much into the idea that there are creative land access solutions that don't look like leasing and they don't look like buying, because also there should be more public land in this world. But right now, if you have that opportunity and you can strike while the iron is hot, you should do it with other like-minded people who will bear some of that work and that financial burden with you, because we are all stronger together. And I don't just mean that with agriculture. End of rant.
So I want to follow that up with, and there's, so I really hit it really hard earlier, and I'm very sorry that I have to hit it so hard that no one's going to give you money. And where there is very limited resources available from the United States Department of Agriculture for people who want to grow and raise food. And yes, I said very limited resources available from the Department of Agriculture for people who want to grow and raise food. The one area that they are desperate to give money away is for the development of cooperative, employee-owned businesses in rural America. Louisiana as a state has millions of dollars available for starting and operating cooperative employee-owned rural enterprises. And so that's one space where there's some money. Now it's going to cost you a lot to get that money. It's really a serious program because starting a co-op is not a little thing. But anyway, yeah, I just think that as a state, there are a lot of us here to help, and we are always going to do our best to never give you a no answer. The answer will be yes, and then there's going to be the 5-month program to help you figure out the yes. But everybody in this state that's a technical assistance provider for our food systems, we're all committed because we're very passionate about this. And we're going to always find the yes and. And Betty, you have a question in the chat box about abandoned poultry houses, and I would be happy to address that topic.
Well, Bahia was in the middle of addressing that and we lost her. Hopefully we'll get her back shortly. But Terreca, any closing comments from you?
Sure, very quickly. The only thing I want to say is this. If you do decide that wholesale or commercial growing is the way to go, no matter how small your farm is, operate your farm at a level of excellence. Because when you build those systems at a very early point in your farm, it becomes much easier to make the transition when you have larger business partners, okay? So just think about it like this. It's like excellence in farming leads to ease of doing business with your business partners. And what happens that I find, farming is a very emotional deal, because farming, your products are just almost like your children or like your babies. And so you hear people, when we ask them about food safety and irrigation and distribution and cold storage, a lot of times you'll get the response of, it's a great product, I feed it to my family, I wouldn't hurt anybody. That's all fine, but that doesn't work in the business world. But if you understand business, you will be very successful understanding that you have to have standard operating procedures in place. You have to do certain things a certain way on a consistent basis. And if you just form those habits early on and you have that business mindset, you'll be very successful regardless of which route you choose to take. And that was my point earlier about marketing. You set yourself apart. If you want to get to the point of, if you consider success to be profitability, that's how you separate yourself from everybody else, is that you have an excellent business model and you embrace technology, you embrace change, you embrace policy, all those things that come into place, that you really want to play the game at a very high level. So I would just say, start your farm with the mindset of being an excellent farmer.
With those comments, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists, Terreca, Margie, and we lost Bahia there, but I'll definitely be thanking her offline. The information, and she's back with us. You were finishing your point about the chicken houses.
Just, I'd be happy to take that conversation and is an in-depth with anybody who wants to have it, but it's a really long conversation.
Perfect. And so with that, we will conclude tonight's webinar. Thank you to everyone who logged on to participate in tonight's webinar. Thank you to our panelists. We will be having a spring webinar, and so by virtue of registering for a webinar series, so by virtue of registering for tonight's webinar, you will also be getting updates and information about the spring webinar series. And so with that, I hope everyone has a good night, has a great Christmas, and a great ending to 2020. And thank you for attending.